Hi there, everyone, and welcome to the Daily Gardener. And thank you for listening. I'm your host, Jennifer Ebling. It's November 25th. Today, we celebrate the Spaniard who brought the pineapple and coffee to Hawaii. And we'll learn about the man who gardened at Monk's house so much it would cause fights with his wife. We'll honor the Japanese American landscape architect who designed many of our modern urban public spaces, and the man who came up with a new kind of berry in the heart of Napa Valley in the 1920s. We'll hear some thoughts about the end of fall from various poets and writers, and we grow that garden library with one of the most beautiful and sophisticated books on our favorite houseplant, the orchid. I'll talk about the 5 microgreens I'm growing for the holidays to impress my guests, and then we'll add things up with some charming advice on starting a walking club from 1890. But first, let's catch up on a few recent events. USA Today is hosting a competition for the best holiday botanical garden. During the winter season, a different kind of color lights up botanical gardens across the United States. Instead of flowers, visitors find twinkling holiday lights, often accompanied by a range of other activities and events. Which botanical garden puts on the best seasonal light show? You get to decide. The voting will close on Monday, December 2nd, and the winners will be announced December 13th. The current standings are a Longwood Christmas at Longwood Gardens. They're number 1, followed by the Lewis Genter Botanical Garden with their Garden Fest of Lights. And then in third place is Coastal Maine Botanical Gardens with their Gardens Aglow. If you have a botanical garden that you want to vote for, simply head on over to the Facebook group for the show. Enter Garden Holiday Lights in the search bar, and this post will pop right up, and then you can follow the link and vote for your favorite botanical garden. Another post that I shared in the Facebook group had to do with a beautiful seawall that was designed for Vancouver. It provided not only much needed infrastructure, but it added tremendous beauty. And when I saw it, it was written in an article by Zach Mortis, who wrote this piece for City Lab. And I thought that gardeners could be inspired by not only the functional aspect, but by the beauty. It just might give you ideas of your own for when you're putting in place standard items like fencing, borders, raised beds, etc. They don't need to be eyesores. Now, if you'd like to check out these curated articles for yourself, you're in luck because I share all of it with the listener community in the free Facebook group, the Daily Gardener Community. Next time you're on Facebook, just search for that, Daily Gardener Community. Click on the link and request to join, and then I'll admit you into the group. I'd love to meet you there. Here are today's brevities. Today is the birthday of the Spanish adventurer and botanist known as Hawaii's original farmer, Francisco de Paula Marín, who was born on this day in 1774. By the time Marín was in his early 20s, he had already made his way to Honolulu. It would be his home for the rest of his life. Marín became a friend and advisor to King Kamehameha, who consolidated all of the Hawaiian Islands during his rule. Marín served the Kamehameha dynasty in various capacities all through his life, but he's best remembered for his work in horticulture. In 1813, Marín grew the first pineapple in Honolulu, and the Hawaiian word for pineapple translates to foreign fruit. 2 years later, Marín planted the first Hawaiian vineyard using vines of the mission grape. And in 1817, with the approval of King Kamehameha, Marín planted the first coffee seeds in Hawaii. And today is the birthday of the man who designed Monk's House Garden, Leonard Sidney Wolfe, who was born on this day in 1880. Wolfe was the husband of Virginia Woolf, and Leonard was the primary gardener and garden designer of Monk's House, although Virginia helped him. Virginia and Leonard lived at the house from the time they first purchased it in 1919 until their deaths decades later. The garden at Monk's House was a retreat and a place that they could both escape from the chaos of London. Leonard loved to be in the garden gardening. He hated tea roses and floribunda roses, but he loved fruit trees like apples and pears, and he sold the fruits to make money. Leonard's devotion to the garden was a source of consternation for Virginia. Leonard spent so much of his time and his money on the garden. Virginia famously complained, "We are watering the earth with our money." Leonard recorded all of his Monk's House garden income and expenditures in a gorgeous dark green and pink ledger book. The first line in the book is dated August 25th, 1919, and he recorded the first gardening work performed by gardener William Dedman. Virginia described Monk's House as the pride of our hearts. In July of 1919, she wrote that gardening, or weeding, produced, quote, "a queer sort of enthusiasm, which made me say, 'This is happiness.'" When Virginia suffered bouts of depression, the garden at Monk's House was the place she went to recover and heal. Since both Virginia and Leonard kept diaries, the garden was a frequent topic. On September 29th, 1919, Virginia wrote, "A week ago, Leonard's wrist and arm broke into a rash. The doctor called it eczema. Then Mrs. Dedman brushed this aside and diagnosed sunflower poisoning. Leonard had been uprooting them with his bare hands. We have accepted her judgment." One of Virginia's favorite places to write was in the garden at Monk's House. She had a small converted shed that she called her writing lodge, and every morning on her way to the lodge, Virginia walked through the garden. The Monk's House garden was the place where she wrote some of her most famous works. One story is often shared to illustrate Leonard's devotion to gardening. In 1939, as the Second World War approached, Virginia called for him to come inside to listen to the lunatic Hitler on the radio. But Leonard was in the middle of tending to his iris, and he shouted back, "I shan't come. I am planting iris, and they will be flowering long after he is dead." After Virginia's tragic suicide, Leonard wrote, "I know that V will not come across the garden from the lodge, and yet I look in that direction for her. I know that she is drowned, and yet I listen for her to come in at the door." At Monk's House Garden, there were 2 elm trees that the Wolfes had sweetly named after themselves, Virginia and Leonard. Leonard buried Virginia's ashes under one of those elms and installed a stone tablet with the last lines from her novel, The Waves. "Against you I fling myself, unvanquished and unyielding. O death, the waves crashed on the shore." Today is the birthday of the Japanese-American landscape architect who designed some of the country's best-known industrial parks, urban spaces, and campuses, Hideo Sasaki, who was born on this day in 1919. Sasaki was born in Reedley, California, and grew up on his family's truck farm in the San Joaquin Valley. During World War II, Sasaki and his family suffered at an internment camp in Arizona, where Sasaki worked in beet fields. As a very bright student, Sasaki went on to study at the University of Illinois and the Harvard Graduate School of Design. Sasaki lived in the Boston area, where he taught at Harvard for more than 20 years, chairing its landscape architecture department from 1958 to 1968, and he founded his Sasaki Associates firm. By 1993, more than a third of all landscape architecture professors had been trained by Sasaki. Sasaki created industrial parks for commercial giants like John Deere and Upjohn. He also designed urban spaces like Boston's Copley Square, New York's Washington Square Village, and the St. Louis Gateway Mall. And today is the anniversary of the death of the plant hybridizer Rudolf Boysen, who died on this day in 1950. In the 1910s and 20s, Boysen had been tinkering with plant genetics. He worked on an 18-acre farm owned by John Lubbins in Napa Valley. On one June morning, Boysen took a walk along a creek bank to inspect some of his new berry creations. He was astonished when he saw that one of the vines bore fruit that was almost 2 inches long. The fruit would become known to the world as the boysenberry. Boysenberries are similar to blackberries, but they have a larger, juicier, and sweeter fruit. The boysenberry is a cross between the loganberry, the raspberry, and the blackberry. In 1927, Boysen advertised them as the sensation of the 20th century. The grower, Walter Knott, had been looking for new varieties of berries, and when he got some of Boysen's plants, he knew it was the berry he'd been looking for. Knott gave Boysen credit by naming the plant in his honor, but he managed to make an empire for himself with the proceeds, establishing the world-renowned Knott's Berry Farm. As for Boysen, he never earned a dime from the boysenberry. In Unearthed Words, here are some thoughts on the end of autumn. The first one is by William Cullen Bryant. The melancholy days are come, the saddest of the year, of wailing winds and naked woods and meadows brown and sere. And here's one from the author Eric Pender. She calls it stick season, this slow disrobing of summer, leaf by leaf, till the bores of tall trees rattle and scrape in the wind. Finally, here's a poem about November by Elizabeth Coatsworth. November comes and November goes, with the last red berries and the first white snows, with night coming early and dawn coming late, and ice in the bucket and frost by the gate. The fires burn and the kettles sing, and the earth sinks to rest until next spring. It's time to grow that garden library with today's book, Orchid Modern, by Mark Hatchadorian. Mark Hatchadorian is the senior curator of the incredible orchid collection at the New York Botanical Garden, and his book, Modern Orchids, is outstanding. The subtitle for the book is Living and Designing with the World's Most Elegant Houseplants. So true. You can read for yourself in Mark's book about the history of orchids and all the different types of orchids. But most of us simply want to know the answer to one or two questions, like, how do I keep my orchids happy and healthy? Or how do I get them to rebloom? To Mark, the answer to those questions is pretty straightforward. In general, we simply need to understand the growing conditions that orchids prefer. Mark teaches us what orchids like by asking us the following 6 questions. Does the location have natural sunlight? How strong is the sunlight? How long does the location receive natural light each day? What temperatures will there be throughout the year, in the daytime and at night? Is the air constantly dry, or does it have some moisture? And finally, how often will I water and care for the plants? If you have an orchid lover in your family, this book is for them, and it would make a lovely Christmas present. And in addition to learning how to care for the orchids, you will get Mark's top picks, and he has 120 of them. Mark also shares some pretty amazing projects that will add to the decor of your home, including terrariums, a wreath, and kokedama. And there's also a project that teaches us how to make an orchid bonsai tree that is absolutely stunning. All of Mark's crafts and projects are a level up from something that you would typically see in a gardening book. Mark provides a level of sophistication and elegance with his work that I just haven't seen in a garden book in some time. When I can look at a project and learn something, whether it's a new tool or a new product that I can source for working on my own floral arrangements, I'm so appreciative, and Mark does that. So hats off to Mark for tackling a subject that most of us feel we could use more help with, and by not dumbing it down. Mark shares super helpful pro insights and modern options for incorporating our most beloved houseplant, orchids. And here's today's garden chore. Start sowing some microgreens for the holiday season. There is nothing like a microgreens garden to satisfy your winter gardening needs and at the same time growing those fresh, nutrient dense garden to table greens that you can grow in the comfort of your own home. For most gardeners, I think the biggest challenge with growing microgreens is learning what dishes can be enhanced with them. By the way, microgreens are just the little seedlings that pop up after you plant the seeds. So, what 5 microgreens will I be planting in time for Christmas? Well, let me tell you. First up is arugula. It's the perfect topping for your Christmas lasagna or a bruschetta, and it offers the same amount of calcium as spinach. Second is basil, my all-time favorite microgreen, the perfect addition to many tart Christmas drinks. And basil is an anti-inflammatory, and I love a sprig of basil in almost any drink that uses tonic. Third, radishes. They're wonderful, fresh additions to salad and even stuffing, and they're as tasty as a full-grown radish. They're packed with vitamin C and protein, and if you like radishes, you'll love radish sprouts. 4, cilantro. This is my son John's favorite. I use it in soups and stews and rice. It's super easy to grow. It's loaded with lutein and beta-carotene. And then finally, 5 is pea microgreens. They're excellent for garnishing any egg dish, and they're fantastic for adding to mashed potatoes. And they've got 7 times the vitamin C of blueberries. And all right, since you asked, I'll give you one more bonus microgreen that I grow, and that's onion sprouts. You use them just as you would an onion. They're a little bit more delicate, but in general, the sprouts taste just like an onion. So there you go, my favorite microgreens for the holiday season. Finally, here's something sweet to revive the little botanic spark in your heart. On this day in 1890, the San Francisco Call shared an article with this headline: walking clubs. Lazy people have no interest in the subject. Here's an excerpt. You may have heard of hundreds of kinds of clubs, and maybe you belong to half a dozen and yet have never heard of a walking club. If so, you've missed one of the best of all. Autumn is here, and the bracing air makes you feel like exercising briskly. The leaves are turning to golden scarlet. The nuts are nearly ripe, and the squirrels are scampering through the trees, chattering challenges with saucy eyes. Take any morning when it doesn't rain, see that your feet are shod strongly and comfortably, and walk as many miles as you can without fatigue. Have a destination. Select a farmhouse or country inn 3 miles out. Manage to get there in time for dinner or supper, and after eating, rest 1 hour. Then come home by a different route. At night, take a bath and go to bed. Take a walk once the first week, twice the second week, and keep that up for 6 weeks. And then walk 3 times a week if the weather permits. Begin with a 6-mile walk and then lengthen it to 10. Keep up those walks during the autumn and winter. In fact, go up till next summer. Get a number to go and keep enlisting new members. There are hundreds of ways of preventing monotony. Incite members to discover new points of interest and get an amateur botanist to join you. Study natural history as you walk. Discuss, argue, reason, but don't quarrel. This is the way to be healthy and wise. Never mind the wealth. That will come of itself. Thanks for listening to The Daily Gardener, and remember, for a happy, healthy life, garden every day. The Daily Gardener is produced weekdays in lovely Maple Grove, Minnesota. You can find complete show notes over at thedailygardener.org, and be sure to share the show with your garden friends. You can find The Daily Gardener on all your favorite social media, Instagram, Twitter, and Pinterest, and of course, Facebook. While you're over at Facebook, don't forget to join the Daily Gardener community. Just search for these 3 words, Daily Gardener Community. The group will pop right up, and then request to join. Finally, I want to thank my team at Podfly Productions, where my fabulous editor is Eric Begay. Have a great day in the garden, and we'll see you tomorrow.